Hi, buddy. I'm Dr. Ricks. Welcome to the first of a series of lectures. I'm going to be doing a series of very brief lectures about statistics and hopefully breaking down the complex topic into little digestible sessions. So, the first one, of course, today is we're going to talk about what is statistics as a general field. Statistics is a subfield of science, and you could also say mathematics. And what it aims to do is take principles of mathematics and the laws of probability to summarize information that we have. So to take complex information or a lot of information perhaps, and to give us digestible pieces of information that will then make sense to us and that we can use, for example, later. And I'll give you an example of that in just a moment. So not only that, it'll describe the information and summarize it for us, but it also then uses what is known about laws of probability and how likely things are to occur, for example, to assess for patterns in that complex information. And again, I'll give you an example in just a moment. What is even better, what's very powerful about statistics is it'll then give us the opportunity to make inferences about the patterns. For example, if I'm seeing the pattern here in what I have, can I apply that pattern to future information, or can I use it uh, uh, in in other circumstances, perhaps? So let's now look at a very brief example. Okay, so let's say that I've got a classroom of students, and I often do, and I could gather a lot of information from those students. For example, I could gather any one of these. I could take their age, I could take their race, I could take their IQ, their socioeconomic status, the zip code in which they live. All of that would be information from the students. And if I have that big body of information by itself, it's not all that useful until I, for example, condense it or summarize it. For example, I might find the average of one of these things that I have. For example, maybe I'll find that the average IQ of the classroom is 106. That's information I can use now. That's interesting in and of itself, depending on what I want to do with it, right? So that is a use of statistics, is to find the average of something. That is a very simple kind of statistics. Specifically, that's something called descriptive statistics, where I'm describing the classroom. Something else that statistics can do that's relatively simple and straightforward is not only that of finding kind of what's the average, but it can also find out how different people are from each other on that variable. For example, I might find that people in my classroom on IQ are relatively the same in IQ. In other words, they're all kind of close to 106 on average. Or I could find that they're relatively different from 106 on average. Either one of those could be potentially very useful to me as an instructor as I'm trying to understand the people with whom I'm working. So that is a kind of statistics called standard deviation, and we will come to that in due course throughout this series. However, that's the main idea of statistics, is that I use it to describe in one way a set of information or a set of data. Now, in a more complex situation, we might take two pieces of information that I've collected from my students and see how they go together or don't go together. For example, let's imagine that I wanted to see if the students' attendance scores affected their exam grades, and they likely do, or at least maybe that's what I think. Maybe I encourage students to come to class because it will improve their grade. But maybe I should check out and see if if there's evidence to support that, for example. I can do that with some fancy statistics. That's probably a correlation, for example, but there are other ways to do that. And we'll talk about that later. Maybe I want to see if students who sit on the left side of the classroom are older than the students who sit on the right side of the classroom, or vice versa. I can also do that with statistics. That would be something probably you'd probably use a t-test is what we're doing there. But again, I'll talk about that later. Maybe I think that their yearly income affects the time they come to the classroom. And I could explain why that is. But the point about statistics is I can start to find evidence that would support or refute any one of these ideas using statistics. So there are different statistical tests that I would use for any one of these depending on the situation it's right for, which we will cover throughout this series. Okay. The point is there's lots of very interesting and valuable things that I can do using statistics and of course sound research methods to answer things about the world generally, or in this particular example, about my classroom. Now, a natural question is, how does statistics figure this kind of stuff out? Like, how does it decide whether somebody on the right side of the classroom, or whether the right side of the classroom generally is older or younger than people on the left side of the classroom. Well, not only does it look at the actual difference in the numbers, which is of course important, but it also combines that with laws of probability. It says how likely or how unusual is the pattern that we're seeing. So for example, let's say I'm doing the older and younger kind of test on right and left. What statistics will do is say, well, yeah, people on average on the right side of the classroom are older than people on the left side of the classroom. That's important. That's a nice first step. But beyond that, statistics then says, but it's an unusual thing to have found just how different they are from each other, just how old they are. Or statistics would say, but it's not an unusual thing to have found people on the right side of the classroom older. They're not so different from the people on the left side of the classroom that you should think this is a pattern that's likely to persist, or there's something meaningful going on here, something interesting going on here. That's really where the true power of statistics lies, is it tells us not only is there a pattern there, but how unusual is the pattern? Is it something that you should start to get excited about or try to explain? So yeah, essentially that's it. If the pattern isn't very unusual, then we just kind of go, oh, okay, well, we just happen to find this pattern, but we can move on with our lives and nothing interesting is going on here. But if it is an unusual pattern, then we start to go, that's interesting. Why is this occurring? And in many cases, statistics can't sort of answer the question for us as to like, why is this occurring? We usually need to do more research. And so oftentimes we'll design studies, do research, the statistics will provide us a pathway, and then we now have to start forging a new pathway to finish understanding this information. Exactly. So for example, maybe I would say that attendance does seem related to exam grades. Now I need to try and understand why that is. What is the underlying maybe causal nature of that? Is it, for example, people who in personality are more likely to attend class also are more likely to study harder? So it has nothing to do with actual attendance, but it's something about personality? Or is it that actually being in class really does influence your ability to learn the material? All right, that's the kind of question we can start to know. But at a bare minimum, I can start to encourage my students to start coming to class more often. All right, so just as a quick summary, statistics takes math and the laws of probability, and it tries to assess for patterns. It says, are there patterns in the data? And if there are patterns in the data, it says, are these meaningful patterns? Should we pay attention to them? Should we be concerned about them? Should we try and do something with that? Yes, and then as we assess those, it can also tell us, is this important enough that you should start paying attention to it and start making predictions given these patterns, or start implementing them in other areas? So that's the kind of thing that we'll continue to cover. Thank you again. The next thing we'll talk about is some of the common mistakes that we'll see, or the risks, I suppose, that we'll see in statistics, and a little brief explanation of Bayesian statistics. Thank you very much for joining me. I'll see you next time.